A lot of leaders and organizations were busy with all of the responsibilities of running just all of the things of organizational life. And what we often do is leave our culture to chance. Once you start to see the symptoms, you've already had a culture problem for probably a significant amount of time. The leaders who get that people are the point, those are the leaders that understand the significance of culture. They get this idea that there are 3 critical building blocks for healthy, successful organizations. A clear sense of purpose, like what's our why, mission, vision. A great strategy to achieve that why, like we need the plan. But the people, your culture, is the linchpin between the two. Like you can't achieve a great strategy, you can't accomplish that mission without the people that make it happen.
Today, I am joined by my friend, Jenni Catron. Jenni is an amazing individual. She's a previous guest. She's a friend. She's a Midwesterner now and has been. She is a leadership coach, author, founder of the Foresight Group. She has a new book coming out about culture. She and I actually, we've known each other for a few years, got to meet each other in person just a couple months ago. And she is a experienced, avid, dealing with travel mishap
This
expert. Is that a fair bio? Does that really encompass everything? She's also a tea lover and a fellow Ted Lasso enthusiast.
This is true.
Okay, did I get everything in there?
I think
Jen?
you did pretty good on that, Tyler.
Okay, I did pretty good.
I think you hit a lot of the high points there, including the travel woes. That's the nemesis this year, but it's all good.
Yeah. So any good, like as I tease that, what's been in the last couple months, what's been like, all right, this has been the highlight. This can only happen to the one and only Jenni Catron when it comes to travel. I want to hear this.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a few to pick from, but my favorite...
I don't need to go that deep. Just maybe...
Right, yeah. My favorite is that when we needed to replace the brakes on the plane after we were fully boarded, doors closed, ready to take off, and all of a sudden, we need to replace the brakes. Like, I would think one would, like you and I on our vehicles, like we kind of know regular maintenance routine, right? And so before you just take off on a long journey, typically if your brakes need to be replaced or not. I'm not a mechanic. Don't do a lot with, I don't know all the ins and outs of airplane brakes. But that was one of my most recent favorites. I was like, we didn't know this.
I would generally think that brakes
are
pretty important on an airplane.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that when you're going like 500 miles an hour, you slow down, you're going like 200 and you want to stop within a, mile distance.
Pretty important.
Probably need some brakes.
I just found it fascinating. We didn't know we needed new brakes until we were ready to take off. But
maybe your real role in our society is helping keep people safe.
It could be. We had another one of my favorites recently was that we were attempting to land and we did 2 attempts and the pilot didn't feel comfortable with the landing. And so they rerouted us back to our previous destination.
Because it was better to land where he came from.
Apparently.
Because he knew that runway.
Apparently. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's
so,
good.
Yeah.
That's good. Again, I think you are the travel safety ambassador. And I appreciate that because I hope that I just fly on the planes right after you fly on them.
I was going to say, just don't travel with me. That's all you need to know is don't be on the same plane that I'm on.
But then I'll be safe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Just my timeline, it's irrelevant.
That's hilarious.
Man, transitioning from that, one of the, you're going to enjoy this. Transitioning from that, one of the things that you are passionate about is helping organizations be safe through culture. And one of the things that you just mentioned right before we got started is you have to be intentional about culture. Culture just doesn't happen. You have a new book coming out about culture. You as well have worked in a litany of different organizations in the faith space to recording space and, worked with a lot of companies through your coaching organization. Where do you see that leaders really take the safety of their employees for granted because they're not doing the maintenance until they're about ready to take off.
Yeah. Oh gosh,
You like how I did that?
did that really
Yeah.
nicely. Like I might actually
Yeah.
have to steal that, Tyler. I'll give you
But
credit.
you go for it.
But
I mean, hey, I'm just trying to give you some extra content for your, future keynotes when you're sharing stories about your life.
Yes.
And how imperative that doing the work on culture before you load the plane.
Yep.
You see what's going on here?
Oh, I mean, you did that masterfully, but I love it. I love it because that is what a lot of leaders and organizations do. We're busy with all of the responsibilities of running the company, the organization, whatever it might be, strategies to achieve, board members to make happy, goals to hit, like just all of the things of organizational life. And what we often do is leave our culture to chance, meaning the health of our team. Like, how is our team? Are they thriving? Are they doing well? And it's only until they're not, like you see, crazy turnover or disengaged or quiet quitting employees. Like, once you start to see the symptoms, then you're like, oh, wait, okay, maybe we need to give attention to that. But by the time you see the symptoms, you've already had a culture problem for probably a significant amount of time, right? Like the brakes are already going bad. And so that's the dynamic I see for so many leaders. A lot of times, we do a lot of consulting at the Foresight Group around organizational culture. And like my biggest hope and my favorite clients are the ones that come in when their culture is not off the rails. But most of the time, people come to us when it is absolutely toxic. The turnover is horrendous. Their board has said something's got to change or you're going to be out, to usually the senior leader, because it's gotten to such an unhealthy place. It's no longer sustainable. And at that point, it's a lot of work to rebuild a team and get a team back to health. And so my heart and desire is to say, I want leaders to be intentional with culture as they are about every major initiative in our companies. Like, think about this. You probably hire somebody to help you write mission and vision and, get your goals set for the year. You build strategic plans. We spend an inordinate amount of time on those big pieces of our organization. And yet, a lot of times I'll say to leaders, hey, how many of you actually have a culture plan? Like, you have a strategic plan, you know your vision, you know your mission, but do you have a culture plan? And I think there's even a statistic that says 90% of us believe that engagement, a strategy for our teams matters, but only 25% of us have a plan. Like, we give lip service to it, but when it comes down to it, it's often the thing that gets put on the back shelf until it's a problem.
So what kind of leaders are more proactive? Like, what traits do they have that you've seen of like, man, I was impressed. That leader actually had things dialed in. Whether you observe or through your coaching, you'll find that is what traits of leaders do you find that, man, they really embraced setting a culture and defining a culture along with those things?
Yeah, love that question because, and I'll tell you via story, like own personal story for me. So the irony of all of this.
Does it have to do with travel?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay. Well, I just didn't know if you had other stories. Those are the only stories I ever hear.
I know, right?
We're just friends. We're just
friends. You just live in my misery of my travel woes. But I mean, I might
hope
find
people
another
listening
one.
are laughing. I hope they're laughing.
They should be laughing.
Okay.
I bet they have experienced travel woes because this year is not the best year for travel. However,
I think that's just you, Jenni.
Maybe it's just me. I really want that tide to change, so I'm really hoping I can help. Help move
so back to the question.
Yeah, back to the question. Okay, I do want to share it via like some story. So the irony is that I'm probably the last person that should be the biggest advocate and champion for organizational culture, because I am an independent, A-type, firstborn, overachiever who loves doing things myself. Like, I pride myself in being independent. People sometimes kind of annoy me if I'm honest, right? Like, I can get a lot more done, it would seem, on my own. And that was my MO when I went into my first career of sorts. You referenced this, but I was in the music business for a decade, worked at a record company, loved my job. It was dream job. But like the first couple of years of my work, I was an absolute bulldozer and had no idea that I was like running people over and burning people out. Like it was all about my goals and my ambition, right? And so a really good mentor leader in my life, at the company I was working for, stopped me and he said, Jenni, if you want to work with widgets, go work in a factory. But if you want to work with people, you've got to learn to love them, to lead them. And that single conversation set me off on a whole journey of leadership development and trying to figure out what a great leaders look like and so forth. And you and I have connected a lot in leadership circles and spaces. So you and I knowing one another has probably a lot to do with that conversation with my leader. But what it also did for me, Tyler, was that I began to notice the power of a team. When a team is working together, when they are aligned, when they're effective, they're nearly unstoppable. Right? And so I started over the next decade watching the teams that I was a part of and noticing that the ingredients, the things that were happening in the teams that were thriving and the teams that weren't. And I was in a big enough corporation that you could see the pockets of it throughout the whole organization. Like this division, everybody loved being with each other, so much energy, they were getting so much accomplished. And this one, there's all kinds of politics and infighting and, turnover and all the typical symptoms of unhealthy culture. And that was the light bulb moment for me of going, people are the point, right? Goals are amazing. Strategies are awesome. I'm a strategic planner. I mean, you give me a goal and I'm going to build you a plan and we're going to make it happen. I am just wired to do that. But as much as that is who I am, the realization for me is that people are the point. And so this was a long way to get to your question, but it's the leaders who get that people are the point. Those are the leaders that understand the significance of culture. They get this idea that there's an illustration that I use in the book and in a lot of our resources where I talk about there are 3 critical building blocks for healthy, successful organizations. A clear sense of purpose, what's our why, mission, vision. A great strategy to achieve that why, we need the plan. You can have a great mission, but if you don't have a plan to accomplish it, you're just kind of singing kumbaya. But the people, your culture, is the linchpin between the two. You can't achieve a great strategy, you can't accomplish that mission without the people that make it happen. And y'all know this, your listeners know this. You can be a one-person show for a while and you can get some things done. But as soon as you bring a team around you with gifts and talents that complement you, with ideas and perspectives that make you better, all of a sudden you get exponentially better. And so again, long answer, short response is that the leaders who get that people are the point are the ones that really see the value in investing in organizational culture. And they're the ones that have the organizations we all want to be a part of.
I'm going to my phone because I didn't have this in my notes. Wow. Why do you say, Jenni? You in the Foresight group sent this email on Wednesday. Overcoming leadership insecurities. We've talked about that. We've talked about our shared understanding. When the response that you just gave and the leaders that understand that people are the linchpin, would you go as far to say those leaders have embraced and understood their insecurities and chosen authenticity as a way to lead?
Absolutely. I think, and of course it's going to come a lot from personal experience, but then watching the leaders that I get to work with, for me, it was that humbling moment of recognizing I don't understand what good leadership looks like. I didn't understand that leadership really isn't about me. It's about supporting and investing in and developing others and drawing out their strengths and their gifts and helping them deploy their gifts and their talents towards this mission. And when that happens, something really magical occurs, right? When you get a team of people that all bring their perspectives and uniquenesses to the table, and then they get aligned around a mission and they do really good work together, it is one of the most exhilarating things to be a part of. And so, yes, I think like, I think as a leader, we have to be conscious of what are the things that make me think I need to be the hero of the story? Why am I afraid to let other people shine? What is it in me that is making this about me rather than about the team? And I'll tell you this, Tyler, too, on the organizations that, I mentioned earlier that a lot of times companies come to us when it's off the rails. And at that point, that leader they're at their wits' end, right? Like a lot of times a board has said, hey, you got to do something about this, or, you're out of here. Or they know this is no longer sustainable. And so they've come to such a vulnerable point that they have nothing they can do but be humble about the situation and acknowledge we have a problem. Can you please help us? And I think, again, why I think sometimes the health of the team, the culture of the team doesn't get looked at sooner is because of the vulnerability required to say, hey, I might not be as good a leader as I thought, or my team might not be as healthy as I wish them to be. And there's a vulnerability in that. We say that, as a Foresight team, I have a team of coaches that work with me, and we say all the time, leaders come to us at very vulnerable moments. Because when you reach out for a coach, and you and I both have had coaches in our life, and we have outside support, but there's a level of vulnerability you get to say, I actually need help here. And until we're at that spot where we kind of overcome some of the insecurities that mask as confidence, until
arrogance.
Yeah, because there's an arrogance of like, well, I've got this figured out. I mean, I did that for a number of years, where it was like I was a part of something that was really, really successful, and we were growing. And I look back on that in hindsight and go, gosh, some things were unraveling behind the scenes, and I was unaware because of my hubris as a leader. And so I think you hit a really important question. I think that willingness to look at our insecurities and recognize that might actually be inhibiting our team is really, really critical.
You mentioned a lot of times the people that come to the Foresight Group are, CEOs or top level executives, and their board or their leadership saying, you got problems, you better fix it, right? And that's a paraphrase. Someone that's listening in, that's thinking, I was like, oh, I can tell our culture isn't right. People don't want to be here. They feel like they're being taken advantage of. They're just another number. It's just kind of, the life is getting sucked out of us every day. To me, those are describers of an unhealthy culture. How do they go about helping that leader who maybe through their arrogance or hubris, or maybe they're of a generation which thinks, too bad, we don't deal with that. Just suck it up and come to work and get paid. How do they start to create change instead of waiting until it's an absolute 85 car pileup?
Yeah, love that question, because we hear that a lot, because a lot of times there's somebody somewhere middle or upper level of leadership, but not in the most senior seat, that says, gosh, I see the challenges, but my leader doesn't see it. First of all, it is okay, influence the sphere you have input over, so like the team that you lead, like, okay, what do you like? Some good questions are, what do you look like at your best? Like when your team's at their best, what's happening? What does that look like? What are the behaviors? What are the ingredients? What are the values? What are the things that are just shaping how your team is operating when they're doing well? Because the other thing I want to be careful of is, like, it's easy for us to focus on the unhealthy culture piece, right? But there's good in your culture, like, or you wouldn't still be standing, right? And so I want leaders to look at, hey, what is good? Like, and because that's what we want to replicate. We want to figure out, okay, what is good? What do we look like at our best? So take the team that you're responsible for and just try to make it as healthy as you possibly can. If you're sniffing out some of the dysfunction in your organization, do as much as you can to provide a more functional experience, like a healthier experience for the team you have influence over. A couple things will happen. It will start to get noticed, because your team all of a sudden there'll be an energy, there'll be an engagement that is an outlier from maybe the rest of the organization. And so people are going to start getting curious, right? Because everybody wants to succeed. That's the thing. At the end of the day, every leader wants to succeed and they need a team to help them make that possible. So do that for where you can. At the same time, looking for the opportunities to raise the questions in a non-threatening way with your more senior leader, in that you might be reading and looking at some resources around culture and you say, hey, you know what, guys, this would be something great for us to look at, because what I'm noticing is that as I'm reading and studying culture's building or eroding every day. Like, it's either, and there's always positives and negatives. There's never like this, fixed, static state for culture, because it's a bunch of people influencing it. So you might look for ways to showcase stories or antidotes of like, gosh, this was a really great thing in our culture. How could we repeat this? You know what, guys, I'm concerned about this over here. Could we look at that a little closer? So you might look at individual circumstances rather than going to your leader and saying, it's a dumpster fire. The whole culture is a mess, right? Because no leader wants to hear that. But I think if you can start raising the stories or the examples and you can model it with the team that you have influence over, you start to pique people's curiosity and open their, they become more receptive to the conversation.
I have a couple directions I want to go. And so I'm trying to condense my thoughts. I think the first one is, as you were sharing that, I thought about an instance that I'm involved in. And as I share this, what I love about, we've talked about, no specific industry. We've talked about travel. We've talked about recording. Obviously, the faith space. I come from, agriculture and network marketing and gyms. I'm going to talk about a high school football team.
Oh, good. Yeah, fun.
And you made the mention, and when I asked the question, it didn't hit me. But my sophomore son is in the middle of this right now. He came from a culture that was high energy, very engaging. It was development first. Now he's on a new team who's had some success last year. They're fairly new. It's a newer high school. This is only their 4th year as a high school. And he was quite shocked after the first game of the lack of healthy culture. As our mutual friend, Jake Thompson, he shared this with me one day. There is no weak or strong culture. It's either positive or negative. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you'd agree with that one in your work, but yeah. I'd encourage you to talk to Jake about it, because he can go way further. But one of the things that my son realized is he expected the seniors to lead in a way that he had seen leaders lead before. He's 16. He's a sophomore. And one of the things that I did to encourage them is, like, after some process, he's like, hey, lead the freshmen like you want to be led, because that's your opportunity. And I think what you just said, as far as lead where you're at, for him, it says lead his classmates, lead the people that in position group, all those things, which he can do. And he has the buy-in of the senior leaders. But one of the things that I relate to high school sports, and here's what I realize, and people that have listened to the show, I've heard this, and I'd love for you to kind of take on this a little bit, is my son at 16 is being told what to expect of his future work culture. He's being conditioned to understand this is what a culture looks like. This is how leaders take, responsibility and drive the culture or not. And I think what you share there is either the hubris of thinking, oh, it'll just happen over time. It'll just develop like we want it without being very directive, or this idea of not understanding what do we look like at our best, and going through point by point by point by point with enough experience to not say, oh, this is what we look like at our best productively. This is what we look like at our best, customer facing. This is what we look like at our best when people feel like I belong.
Yeah. I love that example, Tyler. Like, it's such a good example. And I love that you called out that his expectation of culture is being shaped right now. He's had these 2 distinct experiences, right?
Yeah.
And he's saying...
Well, he's 3, because then he also has the professional and family experience from my wife and I.
That's
And I
right.
think that's what's caught him, because his former football team looked very much like what he had seen in our businesses.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he goes and like, what's going on here?
Right? Yeah. Why?
And almost a shock.
Yeah. Like, does it have to be this way? Yeah. I love that so much, because I think, and that might be, you referenced earlier, that even generationally, leaders will have different perspectives on what workplace culture should look like. And so I think sometimes there's a divide. And, it used to be you just came in, clocked out, and went on your way. Like, work was just something you did to help you, live the rest of your, have the resources to manage the rest of your life. And now work and life are so integrated that I think we have to be conscious of the fact that we need to create environments that people want to give the best hours and the best energy of their day to. That, again, work and life is so integrated that we can't expect them to compartmentalize like generations ahead of us might have done. That's just not how we live and work. And so, and they know they've had experiences of environments where they know that you can do good, meaningful work. I mean, Tyler, some of the best teams I've been a part of, we worked our tails off, right? Like, we were not like, we worked hard, we put in crazy hours. And I'm not saying that that's always good all the time, but like we were there, we were committed, we were engaged because we really believed in the work we were doing. We had good clarity around how we each contributed to it. We enjoyed one another. We knew the values that guided us. We had kind of behavioral standards of how we operated together. And then we accomplished some really amazing things. And they were some of the most rigorous days of my journey, but they were also some of the most rewarding. So it's not that great culture means, everybody's phoning it in. In fact, I think those are some of the most unhealthy cultures, is when we throw a bunch of perks at people, but we don't hold them to a level of, hey, this is what we get to do together, and this is what it's going to take, and this is your contribution, and here's the expectations that we have, and here's how we're going to give you feedback, and here's how we're going to hold you accountable, and here's the flexibility we're going to give you, because we do want you to go to your kid's game, but we're going to be measuring you by the outcomes of your results. And so there's a both and that I think people misunderstand about culture. Like, I think they think it's just all the frills and the fluffy stuff and throw the perks at people and try to accommodate their every whim and desire. And some of those things are valuable, but if they're absent the rigor of doing really good, meaningful work that sometimes is stretching and sometimes is hard, and oftentimes need candid conversations and uncomfortable moments, but we're committed to this thing together. Like, that's where the magic happens in cultures, is when both of those things exist. If you think about your son's team, like, I bet you his last team, where they had good culture, connection, engagement, they also probably gave each other some really tough feedback about what they did or they didn't do that on the field. Yes or no?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yes and no. I think there was a desire for it.
Sure.
But it was a young culture that hadn't achieved much, so they weren't really sure how to do it. They were evolving.
They're figuring it out together.
Yeah. One of the things that I would say was a hallmark: they overachieved. Meaning they achieved more as a team than what their talent added up to be. They won games that they probably shouldn't have. Now, at the same point, they were young, without a lot of experience. They made some mistakes that cost them at times too, but overwhelmingly throughout their season, they overachieved expectations. And I think, to me, that was a great hallmark of a positive, encouraging, healthy culture. Was it perfect? Nope. There's things to work at. Whereas I look at my son's team now, and they've struggled to achieve at the level of their talent. And the biggest thing that I recognize is there's this lack of directiveness to the culture and understanding one facet. And I think of our friend John Gordon and the energy bus And, how much do you see what you just mentioned? Like that experience of, man, we worked our absolute tails off, but we were all committed. We knew where we were going and we were bought in and we were supportive. And there was, ups and downs because there's always warts. No matter what, you look behind, you're going to see it, right? You pull back the makeup, there's going to be some warts. It's life, right? There's going to be some blemishes. It's why we wear makeup. Yes, I do sometimes when I get photography too. Yes, because I get shiny.
You
so I
got
got
to put some powder on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the difference maker is the energy. And I think that comes back to, as we're having this conversation, just thinking through, and I'm thinking through your thoughts as you're sharing things, is what our friend Jake said. There's no weak or strong. There's positive and negative. You have a culture. Every organization that you work, there's a culture already there. Does it have a clear purpose? Does it have a strategy? Does it, reflect on people? Does it have those three attributes along with all the other things that are key through your work? To me, a positive culture has those things, and that creates an energy, that creates momentum and drive. And I think, just a thought, that's what's so hard to quantify, is because it's really, really hard to put a dash of energy. So, we need this much, and that's what's going to happen. Would you agree with that? Like, have you seen that?
Yeah. I think one of my ahas, so a little bit of, the backstory is, I've spent the better part of the last 2 decades looking at the experiences that I had and going, okay, wait, what was going on? What made some of those cultures great? What made some of those kind of terrible? Like, what's happening? And of course, then now I've gotten to work with hundreds of organizations on this work. And the big takeaway for me is that the culture that you have right now is an outcome. It is an outcome of all these little behaviors and things that have happened that lead to this experience that you and your team, because you're also experiencing the culture, right? Like you and your team are having, and whether that's good or bad, whether it's, positive or negative, right? Like that culture you're experiencing is an outcome of behaviors. And so for me, the aha was culture, just like everything else, is a system. Like it needs a system for sustainability. It's like we have to define, okay, where are we and where do we want to go? You mentioned it, like culture, everybody has a culture. And what we have to be honest about is, where are we now? Like, what is our current culture? Tyler, you and I are probably both old enough to remember before we had iPhones and, we had this little blue dot that told us where we were on the map. We had to have big printed maps, like when we were kids, when we were very small, of course, but right, like big printed maps that then you had to go, okay, where are we? What street am I on? What cross street? Like, where's the closest cross street? And you had to, before you could say, okay, and now I want to go over here to Indianapolis, it's like, no, I have to know where I am in order to get to where I want to go. So as you think about culture, you have to be honest about where are we? What is our present reality? What's just a current honest assessment of our culture, the good and the bad of it? And then what do we aspire to? Where do we want to go? What is our hope? And then it's like, now I got to build a plan to get there. What are those values, the beliefs, the behaviors, the actions, the inputs? If you know the work from 4 disciplines of execution, it's the lead measures and lag measures. Culture's a lag measure. We need to determine what are the inputs, what are those lead things that we're going to do day in and day out to help reinforce the best of who we want to be. And I think that's what often gets missed. Again, we think it's sometimes just the fun, fluffy stuff, or it's the episodic staff fun day, or, the perk or the bonus that we did at the end of the year, or whatever it might be. And those things are good. Like, I'm not saying we don't do those things, but they're just one of a number of things that are essential for building a system that both builds and sustains the culture we want. Because again, it's building or eroding every day. Every person on your team is contributing to it. So as people come and go, your culture's impacted. And so there's got to be this intentional effort to say, hey, we know exactly what we need to do to continually invest in the culture we want. And that, to me, was the aha moment, in that I couldn't just hope it would happen. I had to have a strategy. I had to have a plan, a system to support it.
There's a couple more trains here, that the idea that, so often, you mentioned lead measures, lead indicators, lag indicators. The fact that often I think in organizations, leaders, because they don't know how to manage culture, they look at it as a byproduct rather than a driver of production. And one of the things that you mentioned there's a kind of a way to describe this, and I want to ask, what was culture like in United States business pre-pandemic compared to what it is post-pandemic? What was it for us as Gen X? What we saw this evolution to millennials and now Gen Z, because it's wildly different. And one of the great misnomers, I'm throwing out a lot of thoughts here, but is that there's this idea that we placated to the millennials, and, Gen Z, while they're even softer, they just want everything in real time and like that, instead of realizing, as we've continued to up the expectation of what a healthy culture looks like, all the other generations want to partake in it too, not just the new generation. So that's a lot of thoughts all at once. But one of the things that I want to hinge on here is the idea that often we'll bring in activities, offsites, speakers as Band-Aids because we know something's wrong in our culture. And those activities are never Band-Aids. They're a part of perpetuating a healthy culture. But leaders that don't want to invest in the pre-work throw those Band-Aids on and expect it to be fixed.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I think I remember very vividly, there was an organization that I was working with, and they had done a employee survey, to get some data on where is everybody, what's going on, what's the state of our culture. And they got the report back, and it was terrible. I mean, it was like things are not good, which it is hard for senior leaders to really know how culture feels throughout the organization. And the bigger the organization is, the more true that is, right? Like I often will just hard truth to senior leaders is your culture is never as good as you think it is, because you have a lot of control over the experience you have in your seat. The rest of the employees don't have as much control over what they're experiencing, right? And so anyway, they do this research or this survey, they get all the data back. It's not great. And I remember sitting in that room, and the leader looked at the HR person and said, okay, can you go do a staff development day and help turn this around? And I was like, because first of all, it's not just the HR director's job to turn this around. Like, leaders have disproportionate influence over culture. Everybody's helping shape it. We need culture champions. Well, we need those HR leaders or those directors of culture who are the ones keeping a pulse every day and sending out the signals of how are we doing. But like, everybody's influencing it, and leaders have to own it. So there's that. And then there secondarily was a one-time event is not going to fix this. And in fact, if your culture is in that rough of shape, your team are just going to roll their eyes. Like, if this is not part of your regular rhythms and regular way of operating, and they see that your reaction to their feedback is let's just do a big rah-rah day, they're like, yeah, they don't get it. Like, yeah. It actually works against you. Which actually
could drive more people away.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're like, they don't get it. They don't understand what we're asking for. And again, I'm not saying you're responding to every employee women desire and request. I'm not suggesting that at all. But listening with that, curiosity is a big word in leadership circles right now, and I think it's appropriate, right? Like, leaders have to stay curious about what is happening, what's going on, where are my team, what do they need, what's impacting them, what's influencing them. Like, we've got to ask the questions and then really filter and sort through it to say, okay, and what do I need to take away from that? You're not implementing everything that's suggested, but you're pulling out what are the things that are having the most disproportionate impact on the health or unhealth of my team, and how can I be more intentional and purposeful to build a system, to build a structure that supports who we are at our best, like what we want to look like, what we want to aspire to. And also having one of my favorite phrases that makes every one of my clients frustrated is the patience and persistence to stay with it. So we are a culture that loves everything to happen fast. And so we want the quick fix. We want to do the rah-rah event and assume it'll all be perfect and great. When in fact, it's consistent behavior over time. It's our teams seeing that consistent commitment to the things that really are core to who we are and who we want to be. That patience and persistence is critical to healthy culture. Like you don't just magically fix it. You have to be invested in what are the things we consistently do that help shape who we want to be.
Where that takes me is, as I'm thinking here, it's like, okay, we've talked through this conversation about, where does the investment of culture in kind of that strategic element of what is our culture, what's it going to look like, what's it going to stand for, that needs to come early rather than late. That needs to be just as much a forefront of, if we are writing a vision statement for the organization, it is saying, this is who we are and this is what our culture is going to be, because much of how we carry ourselves is what defines the culture.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And the piece that you mentioned earlier, and as I'm going through this and I'm thinking, is there's what that last piece that you said, there's two things that just kept, man, as a leader, you better be vulnerable and just own it.
That's right.
Doesn't mean you have to own all of it, but
Correct.
you own whatever people are saying. Doesn't mean you agree with it, but you own it. And then you commit to saying, you're important, everyone else is important, so we're going to do the best we can to create some type of positive change. Can I do everything for everyone? No. But if I recognize we're not where we want to be, to use like the football team, we've underachieved. And that's an indicator of we got culture problems. And in order to overachieve, like we've talked about, is really an element of how do we get people so bought in that we will go above and beyond. And that means there's leaders that are authentic and vulnerable and take ownership. And as well, people know and believe and trust that they're important and valuable.
That's right. That's right. That's what it is at the end of the day.
If I had to put like 25 words, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was 50, into everything that we've kind of condensed down, that's what I feel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, everybody is just saying they want to belong. They want to give their time, their energy, their talent to something that matters, something that is significant. And I think work is one of the most amazing places we can do that. Now, we need we need all of life. We need all the dimensions of life. Like work is not the only thing. However, work can be an absolutely remarkable place to feel like I am giving my best to a mission that matters with people that I love. That's the goal, right? It's not just making everybody happy. It's saying, hey, how can I draw out the best from all of these individuals, take their gifts and their talents, align that with our mission, get a team of people that actually enjoy being together. Doesn't mean they don't have bad days or they don't have, some tension. In fact, those are typically, when it's done healthy, those are typically really good signs of good culture. When we can have the candid conversation, we can have the honest feedback moments, and then we leave the room unified. I'll never forget one of the teams that I was a part of. Myself and one of the other executives had a pretty rigorous conversation in my office one day. We disagreed about something. We were pretty vocal about it. My door was closed, but a new coordinator was sitting right outside my office. And myself and this other leader, we were hashing it out. And we vehemently disagreed. We came to an agreement about what we were going to do. We opened the door and we're laughing and high-fiving and carrying on. And he moves on and I go back to my office, and this new coordinator who's new to the team walks in my office and she says, "That is the most unusual thing I've ever experienced." She said, in fact, I think my door had been open a crack, and when she heard us arguing, she pulled it closed completely. And she said, "I pulled your door closed because it was so uncomfortable, how you guys were disagreeing over this issue." And she said, and then you walked out and you were laughing and unified. And she was like, "I've never seen people work like that." And I was like, that's part of what we do. We disagreed. And so we worked it out and we talked it out and maybe our voices were a little raised or animated, but like it wasn't ugly or disrespectful. It was just like we were both passionate about the view we had. And I said, I always want a place where we can do that respectfully, but then we make a decision and we walk out in agreement. And it was like, because it was a brand new employee, I thought, oh gosh, I hadn't thought how she would experience that, because this is just what we do. Like we just are able to kind of passionately disagree and, work it through until we feel like we can find a way forward. And then we're good. Like we're not holding on to things. And all that to say, I think the power of teams and culture where people can, again, bring their best energy, bring their best processing and decision making, and work it through with their coworkers, and then come out unified, because ultimately the mission is why we're here. Like we're here to accomplish this together. So all of our own agendas are subservient to that mission, the reason why we're here, the purpose of the organization. And then just some really fun things happen when we're clear of what that is, and we have an amazing team of people unified around it.
I made this mention, and it was, I don't know, a few weeks, months ago, that emotions have a place in business. And what you just described, and some people are like, absolutely not. I'm like, well, here's my opinion. If we don't allow our emotions to be a part of business, we become robots, and then we check out. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to let the control of our emotions go away, but the free roller coaster and understanding someone else's emotions. And like, if we're talking about something and we're going through that circumstance and you're passionate and you're like, Tyler, no, and I just discount it, then all of a sudden I've told you, this is my opinion, I've told you you're not important. My decision, my opinion is the most important, as opposed to, oh, wow, Jenni really, like, she's all in on this. What am I missing? Like, what can I understand? And I think that one part that I've understood, having 3 teenage kids, having an adult daughter now, and understanding that this next wave of, again, they're Gen Z, and what are they looking in the workforce? And I want to wrap up in that. So as we finish up in just this little element, what are you seeing organizationally in driving to, man, as we identify this work, as we go through the process, the framework that you have, in making sure that we're setting our organization culturally up to succeed with the next generation of workforce, what do you believe is most important for them culturally?
Yeah. And there's some research that supports this and backs this. They want to be a part of something with purpose, right? They want to give their life to something that has meaning. And we can do that. I think sometimes it gets clouded over by objectives and goals and things. So you like anchoring it back, and this is our why. This is why it matters. And here's how I see your place in that. So connecting the dots for them so that they see, hey, this is our why. This is what we do. This is why it matters. Here's the purpose. And here's how I see you being a fit for that. I think that is core. Secondly, they want feedback. Like they are used to real-time response all the time. Like they post something on socials and they're getting an immediate reaction to it, right? Like they are used to, and that's been one of the things that has been interesting for me to observe is like they might not like your feedback, but they want your feedback. So, and that means both positive and constructive, because that's where we sometimes get it wrong, is that we can just want to just give we hear feedback is giving just constructive. They also need positive reinforcement. So I think clear purpose and consistent feedback, I think, is really key to that generation. It'd be fun to hear what your perspective though is, because you're raising them too. So you're seeing it in real time.
Exactly that. There's so many options available to them. There's an extreme variation in revenue that doesn't matter as much as it was for our generation. How do I find that 6-figure job?
They're not afraid to figure that out. Yeah.
They'll do different things where that doesn't encumber them. They want experiences. They're fiscally pretty conservative. Mm-hmm. And as well, they want to do something that matters.
That's right.
That they're passionate about, and they understand their place, their role, and their standing. Don't just tell me to do the work and I'll eventually get whatever's. No. Give me the pathway, give me the feedback, let me know where I stand. As long as I'm there with, I'm cool with that. And if I want to be somewhere higher, well, then give me the pathway to get there and don't just play games. And that understanding, and I think that feedback, that being very forward, being very involving them in as much as you can helps them, because they will quickly find, I can do that. And it's when you don't involve them, they're like, well, I'll just sit here and wait until you tell me, because I'm not going to just waste time. Because there's plenty of things they could do otherwise that they just don't need to toil away. And the skill development needs to be extremely, extremely descriptive. Don't give me 15 skills to do and just say, hey, those will show up later for you in life. It's like, no, I want to be very in demand. What skill? How's it going to help me? Where's it going to take me? What's it going to get me? Great, let's go. That's what I see in my kids, but that's what I see from coaching athletes to discussing with a younger generation of workers. And here's my viewpoint on that. In our personality, if who's just kind of like, this is the way it is, right? That's a lot easier. It's a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you got to focus on one thing, and you were told it. I had to learn it. I unfortunately didn't have somebody tell me.
Mm.
But the most imperative thing is love. If you love them, they will do anything for you. Anything. And if you treat them like just a number, they could care less. I'll go find something else. I don't need you.
That's exactly right. Yeah. They want to know they belong. They want to know there's a place for them. And again, people are the point. We need amazing people around the table doing great work with us. And I think the young generation is like, I want to do great work with people I enjoy being with. Like, I think we want the same thing. And so recognizing that and learning how to be intentional with the development of leaders, especially young leaders, is the opportunity for us.
Jenni, where can people find more about your work, the Foresight Group, upcoming book, all of those things? Where can people find
Yeah. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for the conversation. And anytime I get to talk about culture and help encourage leaders on the value of it is a great day for me. So thanks for valuing that and championing it so much. My brand new book, Culture Matters, a framework for helping your team grow, thrive, and be unstoppable, is coming out February 11th. So you can go to culturemattersbook.com and check all of that out, pre-order it, get a bunch of bonuses and fun stuff. And then getforesight.com is the organization that I lead, where we do coaching and culture consulting. So you can check us out at GET4SIGHT.com.
And make sure you go there, get Jenni's weekly newsletter that I referenced earlier. It's great. It's filled with amazing things. And it's actually, I remember the one day you shared about the Ted Lasso biscuits.
Yes.
And I went and ordered those. Those were great.
Biscuits with the boss.
Yeah,
so
that's
fun.
it. Well, for everyone listening, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, and those viewing on YouTube. Again, make sure you hit subscribe and the little bell for notifications whenever I release videos. We have podcast release on every Wednesday, Monday Newswire on Monday, plus shorts and cuts throughout the week. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate and review each episode so that way others can find more impactful leaders just like Jenni. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.